In the United States, 1946, Joseph McCarthy was elected as a senator for the state of Wisconsin. His surface-line political agenda was aimed towards simply ridding the United States of all possible communists. It was learned later, however, that this was not a goal he attempted to achieve by honest means alone. He chose to lie, spread lies, and make people believe lies that then aspired to negative reactions all throughout the country.
The substantial impact of those citizens' reactions, as well as major reforms to the control of free speech from the government, then brought forth McCarthy's inevitable downfall in the 1950s. Those major reforms led to new acts and reused ideas that take part in American society today.
During the McCarthy era, Joseph McCarthy was one of the most known, influential, and feared anti-communists. At the time, a lot of the American public was living in fear of communist spies and communism spreading to America.
Many people, including politicians like McCarthy, took advantage of this fear and fueled it. Many of these people shared claims about groups and individuals of the innocent American public. These people's reputations were destroyed, and most found their life harder for a variety of reasons.
One of the most common outcomes of someone being labeled a communist or a communist sympathizer by someone like McCarthy was the loss of the person's job and difficulty with finding a new one. Some cases of people being accused of being a communist went as far as going to court. Senator Joseph McCarthy gained much power and influence through this time until his downfall.
Joseph McCarthy's downfall, which occurred mainly during April to December 1954, came about due to many variables. One variable that highly contributed to McCarthy's downfall was Edward R. Murrow, Fred W. Friendly, and their news program See It Now.
If the senator feels that we have done violence to his words or pictures and desires, so to speak, to answer himself, an opportunity will be afforded him on this program.
And so did the release of the program on DVD by CBS. Another highly impactful occurrence was the Army McCarthy trials, which were broadcasted live and unedited on ABC and Dumont from April 22nd to June 17th, 1954.
This coverage of over 188 hours reached around 20 million viewers and exposed them to McCarthy's harsh and cruel tactics. This partially led to his public decline and his censure. One of the most well-known and impactful quotes from the Army McCarthy trials is, "Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?" from Joseph Welch during his confrontation with McCarthy. Also during McCarthy's downfall, newspaper companies such as the Daily Worker highly expressed their opinions of the senator, quite possibly also harming his image.
There were also multiple organizations who were working against McCarthy, such as the Joe Must Go Club formed in Sauk City, the Wisconsin State Federation of Labor, Citizens vs. McCarthy, Inc., formed in Madison, and others. Eisenhower also played a crucial role in McCarthy's downfall. He did this by having administration officials and all executive branch employees ignore any call for McCarthy to testify, which left the senator's credibility in tatters, and his fellow senators quickly turned against him. Although the absolute deciding factor of McCarthy's downfall was his denunciation of General Zwicker, which caused the Senate to censure him, finally ending McCarthy's time of power and influence.
Of course, everyone had their own opinions at the time regarding McCarthy, his beliefs, his actions, and his methods. Famously, President Eisenhower was morally against McCarthy's methods and actions. He was particularly enraged by the Wisconsin senator's military claims. Eisenhower worked behind the scenes to undercut and hinder the progress of the senator and his attacks. Many American citizens who were current or former members of the Communist Party were terrified of McCarthy, and some even went into hiding.
Some former communists actually agreed with McCarthy, or at least didn't speak up against him. Meanwhile, other communists and former communists simply wouldn't give names if interviewed or interrogated. Even citizens who were not and never were communists didn't dare tangle with McCarthy out of fear of being labeled as disloyal. Some of those who did speak and or publicly go against McCarthy joined, founded, or helped groups like the Wisconsin State Federation of Labor, Citizens vs. McCarthy, Inc., and the Joe Must Go Club.
There were, of course, many people who actually did agree and support McCarthy, some even after his downfall. The government's reactions were quite similar to the citizens' reactions, although many senators at the time supported McCarthy. Of those who opposed McCarthy, not many voiced their opinions, and those who did were often labeled as disloyal, communists, and/or communist sympathizers. McCarthy had both knowledge and influence over the press, and he used it to spread false information to the American public. He supposedly told the press fake breaking news about what will happen the next day, and the paper would put it in because they knew that McCarthy was popular and his headlines would sell.
But of course, most of what McCarthy said would happen didn't actually end up occurring. He used the press to stay popular and create panic. Naturally, many people blamed the press for McCarthy's popularity. Not many large news companies spoke against McCarthy out of fear of being labeled communist sympathizers or communists themselves.
But this doesn't mean that those in the press, like newspaper authors or editors, were safe from McCarthy's accusations. One example of this is James Weckler, an editor of the New York Post who was brought before the McCarthy Committee because in his youth he was a communist. The array of issues that Joseph McCarthy left behind for America would not be ones that would and/or could be fixed in a couple years' time. They would be issues that may seem to get better than later presenting themselves in new forms.
The term McCarthyism in the 1950s and 60s was globally recognized as only referring to Joseph McCarthy and his actions. However, in later years, McCarthyism became a term used to describe any campaign or practice that endorses the use of unfair allegations and investigations, and also being commonly linked to communism, but not always. One example of a later version of actions or events related to McCarthyism were actions taken in the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act, also known as the USA Patriot Act of 2001.
This act's purpose was to prevent and protect American citizens from terrorism. While this act on the surface seems irrefutable, some actions from it cause issues through the eyes of many citizens. For example, this act allows searches by authorities without prior notification of the person being investigated. Many citizens argue that it was a violation of their civil rights, saying that people have a right to know when being searched and a right to refuse a search without a warrant. This and other minor actions that took place from this act led to this being dubbed an act of McCarthyism. However, because of reforms made to this act in 2016, it remains now only as a minor example of McCarthyism.
More prominent forms of McCarthyism can be found in the new term Trumpism. While Trumpism is not listed in any dictionary, the people who use it have primarily agreed upon a definition, this definition being the current ideology of President Donald Trump. This is a form of McCarthyism because their definitions are very similar, both of them about a person whose actions were dubbed unprofessional and dishonest at the cost of innocent civilians.
To summarize, years ago, Senator Joseph McCarthy's downfall was a turning point for the lives of many Americans, especially those who he had personally affected by his actions. These said actions were in an effort to keep and/or receive power to himself and his influence.
While it can be argued that McCarthy was acting in ways that were completely reasonable, many ruled his work as dishonest and unprofessional. This then leaving many issues to arise while he was in power, and many mixed reactions from citizens. These issues specifically stemmed from a range of different actions and events, such as purposely spreading misinformation. He did this thanks to his abundant knowledge of the press and incoherent drive for control.
Because of everything McCarthy had done, he was someone that would not be forgotten. McCarthy's presence would be something that would stay with America for a long time after. This led to eventually causing major reforms to government regulations of speech.